I did it. I finally left my 9-to-5 corporate America, medical sales, 6-figure job. Sick and tired of the endless rat race.
So I just quit my corporate job and I have no backup plan. None. None at all.
Hey, this is a message to the finance major I hooked up with my senior year of college. Hey, Diva, I know you know I'm queer now, but I also know I didn't know anything about saving or retirement.
Millions of American workers are quitting en masse, coldly walking out of the familiar office buildings they once knew so well. Although the quit rate sometimes hovers around the 2% mark, the overall labor force has shrunk by more than 1 million people in just the past year, accompanied by millions of discouraged workers struggling to spend nearly 25 weeks just to find a way out into a new job. Yet don't be so quick to call this a passing trend or some youthful impulse from people who are easily bored and quick to move on. This phenomenon is actually a widespread great upheaval in the way people think, reflecting the stark reality that the modern workplace is becoming more toxic, deadlocked, and disillusioning than ever before. When desks piled high with paperwork no longer offer any guarantee beyond back pain in your later years and endless, meaningless meetings, choosing to turn one's back on it may simply be the final straw after years of enduring a system that deliberately ignores human value. All you had to do was work diligently, remain loyal to a company, follow every rule, and devote the best years of your life, and the system would give you a worthy sense of security in return. A suburban home with a lush green lawn, enough savings to enjoy a comfortable retirement, and above all, respect from society. That was the core of the office version American dream that the previous generation, especially the baby boomers, worked so hard to build and pass down to us with that flame of belief. You were taught that perseverance was the key, that sticking around through the ups and downs of the market would eventually bring sweet rewards. That behavioral model once served as a moral compass and a driving force for millions of people to willingly stay in the office until late at night, miss family meals, and tell themselves that every sacrifice was worthwhile. But the reality of life is now far harsher. You work harder, take on the workload of colleagues who have been laid off, yet the numbers dancing around in your bank account with every paycheck seem unwilling to move in proportion to the sweat you pour out. Your nominal income may inch up slightly, but it has been completely left behind by the breakneck pace of inflation and the real-world surge in prices. Look at the skyrocketing electricity bills, the expensive medical costs at systems like Blue Cross, or the rising prices at familiar retail chains such as Walmart and Home Depot every weekend. The cost of living crisis is turning full-time workers into people struggling right on their own soil. You work harder than ever, yet building wealth to secure your later years feels as distant as reaching for the stars. Meanwhile, at the very top of the ivory tower, everything is playing out in an entirely different dimension. According to analyses, the income gap between executives and ordinary employees has been pushed to an absurd level, with CEOs of major corporations today pocketing average compensation more than 280 times that of a hard-working ordinary employee. It is bizarre that management is always loudly preaching about tightening our belts and cutting costs whenever profits decline, while their million-dollar stock bonuses and benefits continue to swell after every financial quarter. That glaring injustice has triggered an unprecedented crisis of trust. When decades of dedicated effort can no longer buy financial security, the final layer of illusion finally collapses. You begin asking yourself a pivotal question one exhausted morning: what the hell am I actually doing with my life? The moment you realize that you are merely trading your time, health, and peace of mind to make people richer who cannot even be bothered to remember your name, that is when a skeptical mindset toward the system begins to take shape. The shift from quietly tolerating and enduring to a feeling of simmering discontent is precisely the spark behind the current wave of change. People no longer want to bow their heads to empty slogans or meaningless meetings designed to make people look important. When the system no longer keeps its original promises, the fact that you, or millions of other Americans, are beginning to seriously question the value of your current job is no longer an impulsive act, but a belated, yet inevitable awakening. Do you still remember what it felt like to go to work without someone constantly standing over your shoulder, scrutinizing every mouse click or every line of an email? Things are different now. Corporate culture seems to be turning into a miniature surveillance studio, where micromanagement appears to have taken center stage. Instead of giving experienced employees like you the trust and space to handle their work independently, Up-and-coming bosses seem to enjoy sticking their noses into even the smallest details. They stand there, sighing, scrutinizing, and reminding you, as if you were a toddler learning to walk, rather than someone who has spent decades gaining real-world experience. The most basic level of respect seems to have been left behind in the parking lot a long time ago. The gap between senior managers, the ones who spend all day sitting in glass-walled, air-conditioned offices, and the employees carrying out the actual work on the lower levels, is growing ever deeper. You are no longer a flesh-and-blood human being with a name and a family. In their eyes, you are probably just a replaceable component in the business machine of these model corporations. The use you up and throw you away mentality is applied to the fullest through pressure that forces employees to work beyond the limits of their contracts. They squeeze every last drop of sweat out of you, drain your personal time and those rare evenings with your family, while never caring about how you are supposed to regain your energy so you can return to that brutal grind the next day. Want proof? Just look at the payroll. The compensation ratio between CEOs of major corporations and ordinary employees has now been pushed to an absurd level, exceeding 280 times. 280 times. Where is the fairness? What does years of unwavering dedication get you? While you have to count every dollar to cope with high prices at major supermarkets or health insurance premiums that rise sharply every year, the executives upstairs are busy approving million-dollar stock bonuses and benefits. They constantly chant the refrain of tightening our belts, cutting operating costs, or freezing raises whenever revenue shows signs of slowing down. Yet strangely enough, the luxury cars parked in the executive-designated spaces never seem to get any smaller. The extreme wealth gap is visible right between the floors of the same building, spreading a deep sense of injustice and completely suffocating the last scraps of loyalty you have left for the organization. And to add even more color to this already colorful corporate picture, we have a form of language known as corporate speak, a hollow culture filled with meaningless meetings that drag on for hours just to discussing work. They throw around flashy concepts like company, family, or team spirit, but in reality, they use them merely as a perfect disguise for exploiting your personal time. You sit there, listening to young bosses use grandiose language to explain why you have to stay late without overtime pay, and you ask yourself why you have to put up with this ridiculous charade. It is no surprise that recent labor market surveys show that the majority of workers consider their current workplace highly toxic, serving as the root of chronic burnout. When you bring those frustrations to the HR department in the hope of finding some measure of fairness, what you usually get back are nothing more than evasive answers or cold indifference. Internal support channels seem to exist only to protect management, never to stand on the side of workers. And perhaps that is when you realize that abandoning this system is sometimes not a sign of weakness, but the only way to preserve the last bit of dignity and peace you have left for yourself. Burnout spares no one. Do you remember the last time you left the office or shut down your computer while it was still not completely dark outside? In this modern grind, the boundary between working time and living time seems to have been ruthlessly erased. The workload keeps swelling after every round of layoffs, forcing you to take on the work of 2 or 3 people while your salary remains stuck in place. 10 to 15-hour workdays or midnight calls to check on work have become a suffocating new normal. Data from recent labor market reports show that more than half of the US workforce is drowning in chronic burnout, the highest levels seen in many years. You are not only working with your mind, your body is also being drained, exhausted down to the last drop of energy just to meet unreasonable deadlines imposed from above. Waking up in the morning with a heavy body, dragging yourself to work with dread hanging over you, and counting every passing minute has become a repetitive movie playing over and over again in your life until you are sick of it. And the bitterest part is that this thing called work refuses to stay in the office. It follows you home, climbs onto the dinner table, and lies beside you in the bed that is supposed to be the most peaceful place of all. Burnout does not merely reduce productivity, making you stare at your computer screen with a vacant expression and overwhelming boredom. It also creates a devastating domino effect on your personal life. You come home irritable, with no energy left to talk to your partner or watch your children grow up day by day. Prolonged exhaustion quietly digs deeper into the cracks in your family, turning dinner tables into heavy stretches of silence. And you know what? Excessive work pressure is the trigger for depression, anxiety disorders, and long-term health consequences. What an excellent trade-off. You sacrifice your health and family happiness to a corporation that would be ready to replace you with someone else first thing next Monday morning if you fell ill. But even the worm that is stepped on too hard will writhe, and everyone eventually reaches what is called a breaking point, the point where endurance finally breaks. There will be some fateful morning when the final drop spills over, and you look at your work email screen and suddenly realize that you cannot even lift a finger to type another word. All your financial fears, all the tolerance you have maintained for so long, suddenly disappear in the face of one harsh truth. You are destroying yourself for a place that does not care whether you live or die. That is the moment when millions of Americans have chosen to let go, submit their resignations immediately, or even stand up and walk away from their jobs in the middle of everything without any backup plan at all. People no longer want to care about seniority compensation or the empty promises of year-end certificates of recognition. When a spring is compressed to its absolute limit, an explosion is inevitable. Walking away at that point is not youthful impulsiveness, but the desperate cry for help of a person trying to save their own dignity and the remaining years of their life before it is too late. Have you noticed that the pace of new job creation in the United States has experienced significant slowdowns? Those who happen to lose their jobs or want to make a sudden change are now facing periods of long-term unemployment that last much longer than before. Statistics show that millions of people have struggled for months on end to send out applications, only to receive silence or automated rejection messages from hiring systems. Businesses, from major corporations to familiar retail chains like Walmart and transportation companies, are scaling back, hiring, cutting personnel budgets, and setting absurdly strict standards for the few remaining open positions. And if the economic picture out there is not already cold enough, the shadow of modern technology is now breathing down the necks of the workforce. The wave of automation and AI integration is being aggressively pushed by corporations to thoroughly replace repetitive tasks and optimize labor costs. You may have already seen automated software, chatbots, or intelligent analytical tools gradually appearing everywhere, from the accounting departments of insurance companies to logistics management operations. What is worth noting is that this technology is not stopping at threatening low-level jobs. It is gradually moving into mid-level professional positions as well, the very places where experienced and tenured workers like you once felt the safest. A sense of uncertainty takes over as you watch machines and software gradually take over the workplace, making you wonder what decades of real-world experience ultimately mean to managers who only look at numbers and profit optimization. You become vulnerable to downsizing decisions that can be triggered with nothing more than a single click of an algorithm. This double pressure from a bleak labor market and the shadow of technology has produced a strange paradox, the phenomenon of job hugging. On one hand, you feel suffocated and desperately want to walk away for good. On the other hand, the fear of a financial nightmare pulls you back to your desk every morning. The fear of unemployment in a cold labor market, combined with the high cost of living, has turned the workplace into a reluctant, safe prison. You are forced to grit your teeth and stay in toxic environments, swallowing your dissatisfaction just to keep your health insurance card or pay your monthly living expenses. The result is an atmosphere saturated with simmering dissatisfaction spreading everywhere, reducing productivity, and wearing down the mental well-being of people who should, in theory, be enjoying the most stable years of their lives. What will happen next Monday morning if you suddenly slam your laptop shut and say goodbye to the office? The feeling of freedom may be sweet for exactly the first 5 minutes, before the reality of the numbers hits you straight in the face. Leaving a job that seems safe means your monthly income stream disappears completely, forcing you to watch the savings you accumulated over so many years visibly drain away with every round of bill payments. And then there is the biggest obsession of all: health insurance. The invisible tether that major corporations like Blue Cross or United Healthcare used to keep us tied to our office chairs. Without an employer-sponsored insurance card, even a sudden illness can turn into a financial disaster. The lack of emergency support funds, combined with a cold labor market out there, may leave quite a few people feeling unsteady, as if they were walking a tightrope without a safety net. Freedom seems to always come with an outrageous price tag that not everyone is willing to pay. But perhaps we should not delude ourselves into thinking that simply submitting a resignation letter will automatically make every dead end, pressure, or exhaustion disappear from our lives. Many people mistakenly believe that escaping that suffocating office is like stepping into paradise. The harsh truth is that the psychological burden may continue to follow you even after you are home. Uncertainty about the future, worried looks from loved ones, or invisible pressure from society can sometimes dig even deeper into an already empty mind. Rushing headfirst into a new direction or trying your hand at self-employment without careful preparation can easily push you into similar pitfalls or even worse ones than those at your old workplace. Instead of escaping the system, you may sometimes lock yourself into a new vicious cycle of worries about making ends meet. Walking away, when all is said and done, is not a magic wand capable of solving every problem that life has laid out for you. Even so, when faced with a corporate system that is increasingly eroding people's dignity and strength, there will be moments when continuing to endure becomes the worst possible choice. Accepting extreme risk, giving up false stability, and stepping into an unknown territory may well be the biggest gamble of the second half of a person's life. The rush to leave one's home country is no longer a story limited to young people who love to move around or early retirees looking for warmer places. Data shows that the percentage of American workers leaving domestic jobs to work abroad has doubled, reaching nearly 6% of all job changes. From technology specialists and engineers to people working in consulting services, thousands of skilled workers are quietly or openly turning their backs on the domestic market. Data from immigration authorities in various countries shows that the number of U.S. citizens applying for long-term visas has reached record levels. What is calling them from across the ocean? The answer lies in a concept that American corporations often forget: work-life balance. While major cities like New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles consume most of your income just to pay rent and medical bills, many countries in Europe and Latin America offer a much more breathable environment. From Spain and Portugal to Germany and Italy, flexible visa programs for digital nomads and international professionals are designed like life buoys. You can find a less stressful living environment, significantly lower living costs, a public healthcare system that does not leave you buried in debt after a single medical visit, and most importantly, a pace of life that allows people to actually exist rather than simply work themselves to exhaustion. Even as major brands like Delta and United Airlines continue to raise airfares, the one-way flow of people moving from the United States to emerging technology and cultural hubs abroad shows no sign of slowing down. This phenomenon represents a historic reversal for an economic model that once prided itself on being the destination for the world's capital and talent. Instead of American businesses taking jobs offshore to other countries to cut costs, workers themselves are now offshoring themselves out of the domestic economy. They are taking their skills, experience, and years of accumulated savings with them to contribute to foreign labor markets, places where their efforts are more highly valued and more fairly rewarded. This large-scale migration is the clearest warning signal to the domestic governing system. When an economy loses its ability to retain the people who have contributed most devotedly, the price to pay is not merely a shortage of workers, but an irreparable fracture in trust in the so-called promise of a prosperous future in their own homeland. If you have ever placed your full trust in a social security check and considered it your final lifeline in old age, you may need to think again. Why? The National Retirement Fund is approaching the point where its reserves will run out. If lawmakers on Capitol Hill continue to hesitate and endlessly argue, tens of millions of workers approaching their later years could face cuts of up to 22% in their legally mandated retirement benefits. As the ratio between the number of people paying taxes and the number of people receiving benefits has fallen dramatically from more than 5 to 1 in the 1960s to around 2.9 to 1 today, the system is beginning to gasp for breath. Baby boomers are entering retirement en masse, like a flash flood sweeping through federal finances, leaving behind a deficit hole amounting to tens of trillions of dollars. But anyway, don't place too much hope in outdated concepts like defined benefit plans anymore, because the model of providing a full monthly retirement income after people leave the workforce has been almost extinct in the private sector for a long time. Today's generations, from Gen X to millennials, are being handed a more modern promise, but one filled with uncertainty, in the form of 401k accounts or IRAs. Instead of having businesses shoulder the burden, You are given complete responsibility to bear the risk yourself when Wall Street suddenly takes a nosedive. As inflation skyrockets and living costs in major cities continue to climb, the savings in your personal investment accounts could evaporate at any moment before they are even enough to buy decent health insurance. Taking care of your own future turns out to be a game in which the house always holds the advantage, while workers keep diligently throwing money into a bottomless pit. Pause for a moment and look at reality. The road to reaching legal retirement age seems to be stretching endlessly, opening up a future in which many people will have to keep struggling through their 60s and 70s instead of enjoying a peaceful retirement. The feeling of being left behind after decades of diligently paying taxes, only to receive vague promises from a crumbling social safety net, may be the bitterest flavor of all in one's later years. No matter how you look at it, constantly submitting resignation letters or endlessly harboring frustration can sometimes be nothing more than a temporary form of escape. Running away from a terrible workplace to somewhere that may not necessarily be any better is no different from jumping from the frying pan into the fire if you have not mapped out a clear direction for yourself. Perhaps it is time to stop leaving your life at the mercy of forces beyond your control and start designing the trajectory of your own life with your own hands. That initiative begins by redefining your core values and the practical skills you have honed through years of experience, rather than depending on titles handed out by some organization. You can build a more independent financial ecosystem for yourself, from taking advantage of flexible income sources and trying your hand at personal projects, to stopping by Home Depot's self-service stores to complete small projects at home. When you have backup options of your own in your hands, the fear of instability in the market out there seems to lose some of its power to hurt you. But ultimately, the fault does not lie entirely with you. For corporations, this is perhaps the strongest wake-up call yet, that they cannot continue maintaining outdated, authoritarian management models or squeezing workers' time without paying a price. When boards of directors remain obsessed with cutting costs and pushing sales, what they get in return is a wave of quiet quitting spreading throughout every corner of the office. The constant frustration and the state of employees doing only the bare minimum just to get by are eating away at internal productivity, turning once powerful business machines into inefficient, empty shells. Major brands, from General Motors to large and small retail corporations, are being forced to confront a harsh reality. If they refuse to change their management culture, respect personal space, and genuinely improve compensation and benefits, they will never be able to retain truly dedicated people. And when the system refuses to change, choosing to step outside it to find peace and true value for the rest of your life may be the wisest choice of all. The wave of millions of Americans walking away from suffocating offices is not a momentary impulse from people who are easily bored and quick to move on. It is, in reality, a powerful wake-up call for an outdated economic and workplace model, where promises of long-term security have been distorted by inflation, toxic pressure, and the indifference of major corporations. As old value systems collapse piece by piece beneath the pale fluorescent lights, workers are beginning the process of reclaiming their autonomy, forcing the entire system to seriously reconsider its perspective on success, the value of human labor, and the true meaning of life. In the end, do you think major corporations will actually change the way they treat their employees before it is too late? Or will this wave of migration continue sweeping through many more generations? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next round of straight-shooting perspectives.